Hey, what's up, everybody, and welcome back to That Triathlon Show, the podcast presented by scientifictriathlon.com. I'm your host, Michael, and this episode is Q&A number 43. And it is my great pleasure to once again have done a Q&A episode co-hosted with scientific triathlon coach James Teagle. We have two really good, really interesting questions that we'll go into today. First on weight management and weight gain during Ironman training and what it might be related to, and also about swim training and the amount of intensity in traditional swim training programs. We'll get right into them after thanking our sponsors. First, big thanks to Precision Hydration that you can find on precisionhydration.com. They have a free online sweat test. If you haven't taken it already, be sure to go and do it. It's very simple. You'll just answer 10 simple questions in an online quiz, and that will give you a good ballpark estimate for your individual sweat rate and sweat sodium content so that you can, and then that will give you a guide for how you should hydrate, what amount of electrolytes might be appropriate for you in your next race. And especially if you are going to race in longer races or hot temperature races, then that can be really critical. Be sure to give them a try. You can try your first box or tube of Precision Hydration electrolyte product for free with the promo code THATTRIATHLONSHOW, all one word, all caps. And a big thanks to Roka that you can find on roka.com. Roka are the leaders in wetsuits, tri-suits, apparel, and high-performance eyewear. And the eyewear side of things is something that has been growing over the last couple of years in particular. The main reason for the really fast growth rate in the eyewear segment for Roka has been the amount of innovation that they put into it and really the quality of the eyewear. They're really revolutionizing that segment of the market with things like the anti-slip technology. There's a funny commercial if you go to roka.com that you can see with people trying to shake their heads in all sorts of ways to try to get their glasses to fall off, and it's just impossible. They have superb optics, of course, in all their glasses. And more recently, Roka started with performance sunglasses for cycling and triathlon endurance sports in general. Then followed more casual streetwear sunglasses, I guess you'd call it. And most recently, Roka has actually entered the prescription glasses sector as well. So they do that as well, which is really, really amazing. They have customizable options, home try-on options. So go to roka.com and check it out. Of course, today I talked about the eyewear segment, but you can read all about their wetsuits and swim skins and whatever you're interested in there as well. And if you order anything, be sure to use the promo code TTS, all caps, to get 20% off your entire order. All right, here's the Q&A with Coach James Teagle. So today's first question that we have here is, if you are gaining weight, fat and not muscle, during the triathlon season, what steps would you take to diagnose the cause of the problem? Should I be systematically doing experiments with different macros and nutrition? Should I be getting metabolic testing? How do I know if it's from overtraining? My backstory is I have 3 seasons of triathlon under my belt, and all 3 seasons I have gained about 10 pounds of mostly fat and then dieted to lose that weight after the race season ends. This is getting so old. I have always logged my food on MyFitnessPal, and I'm very diligent about my macros, getting about 50% carbs, 30% fats, 20% protein, and getting enough calories in during all my workouts. Currently, I am training 15 to 20 hours a week for my second Ironman, and I'm so depressed I have already gained back all the weight I struggled to lose after my last Ironman. Interestingly, last year I trained myself on a lower volume, higher intensity program and still had the same problem. I have listened to all your episodes on nutrition, and my gut is well trained. The professionals, a coach and nutritionist I work with, are hesitant to tell me that I should be eating less, which is understandable, given that most triathletes struggle to eat enough and women are more susceptible to stress fractures and hormonal issues from inadequate caloric intake. My menstrual cycle and blood work are all normal. And this question comes from Lauren in Maryland. So, James, what do you think about this?
Well, I think, before we start, we've got to add a few caveats in here. Obviously, be careful with anything nutrition-wise, to have a sensible approach. Don't take anything too extreme, especially, just from listening to this. Obviously, we're not trying to diagnose anything over one podcast. I'd say, just being careful. I mean, we don't know how much Lauren weighs already, and I'm not saying that she's, you know, this is an issue or something like that. I'm just saying that, if Lauren's tiny already and then adding on, 10 pounds, maybe she's just getting back to normal race weight. I mean, obviously that doesn't sound like what's happening, but that could be happening. But yeah, let me try and answer the question. So, um, my initial response when I saw this question was, it's probably due to when you're actually taking in your timing and taking in your food, and actually the timing around that. So, going back to an example from my background in triathlon, a couple of years ago, in the squad I was with, we were having a few issues with bone health, and people getting a few stress fractures and bone injuries. And one of the reasons behind that could have been calorie deficit. So we nutritionists went and looked back at everyone's calories, what they were eating and where they were eating, and what they essentially came back with was two things: you're not eating enough, and you're eating at the wrong times. And obviously, being athletes, we're being triathletes who were training a lot. You were like, well, what do you mean? I mean, we're eating a lot of food. Our weight isn't going down. If anything, it's going up because we're on our off season. And what they came back and said was, essentially, yes, we understand what you're doing, but what you're doing is you're teaching your body to survive and not thrive. So you're teaching your body, you're not giving it enough food, and when it does get food, it's storing it as fat because it's trying to survive for next time. So if this happens again, it's trying to make sure it has the energy to go again next time. So if you think about that in a really basic way, you're basically dieting. So when you're training, you're not having any food. You're starving your body of energy, and then when a couple of hours later you have maybe a big meal or something like that, and you get any calories in, essentially you're just putting energy back into your body, and your body is like, well, I've just been starved for 4 or 5 hours, and now I'm going to start putting it on again as fat just in case it happens again, which stops you from putting that energy into rebuilding bones, rebuilding muscle, making the adaptations that you need from your training.
Yeah, and that's hardwired into our genetic code from an evolutionary perspective. It's that feast and famine approach that our bodies have learned to deal with over thousands of years, when food has been harder to come by in previous times, and we basically have had to develop the skill, I guess, to store food as fat and survive on it for a long time, because we don't know when we're getting the next meal. And as you say, and even potentially if you are getting in calories during the workout, you might still be in if it's a big workout, in such a big caloric deficit, and especially if you're then not diligent on getting food immediately after that workout, so you're extending that window when you are in a big caloric deficit, then that potentially could be an issue. And exactly as you say, the body is just simply trying to survive, not thrive, and storing it as fat. So yeah, I think that is potentially a reason here. Definitely something worth looking into, the timing aspect.
Also, I was going to say, I know you had some different thoughts, Michael. So I was just going to try and lead it into you for you.
Yeah. So it's essentially leading to the same issue here with storing food as fat and surviving, the body surviving, not thriving. And but it's training related here. That was something that I thought of as well, that potentially if you are overtraining, and you are asking that, how do I know if it's from overtraining? If you are overtraining, then potentially you are in such a big stressed state at all times. You're in you're experiencing parasympathetic shutdown and or sympathetic overdrive, so you're constantly in that fight and flight response mode. And that's where, again, the same thing might happen, that you're storing all the food that you're taking in as fat, and you're not using it to build muscle and restore glycogen. It's just getting put into those survival stores.
Yeah, that makes perfect sense to me. One of the things that again, I'm hesitant to say, but could be an issue is, are you overestimating the calories you're burning in exercise? So, unless you're being really diligent around, actually making sure you're using a consistent devices, so using heart rate, using power to estimate the calories burned in exercise, there is a possibility that your devices are overestimating how many calories you're burning. I'm not saying that's going to be the case for everyone, and I'm not saying it's the case for Lauren, but from my experience, if you go and do an exercise without heart rate or power, just look at the calories you burn and then compare it to exercise, of similar intensity and similar duration, where you did use both, and what you'll find is, the calories it estimates that you burn are a lot higher. Obviously, not many athletes are going to be doing that, especially listening to this. Most athletes will be using the heart rate and power, but that's something to bear in mind. Uh, you know, Especially from experience of looking at that, and then using things like MyFitnessPal to try and work out your calorific deficit, or how many calories you need to eat to lose so much weight or put on so much weight. Obviously, that's going to have a big impact if you're estimating those calories you burnt wrong.
Yeah, with MyFitnessPal, I think it's a great tool, and you say that you are very diligent about using it, and so you probably have a very good handle on it. I just think that I've used it quite a bit for using it every now and then for a few days to just get an idea where I am, and try to just keep in touch with how much I'm eating. And I guess what I found is that it's very easy to underestimate how many calories you are taking in, just because you need to measure really everything, because all the small things add up, and it gets really tedious, which is why I never use MyFitnessPal more than 2 or 3 days consecutively, really, because it takes so much time to actually track all the things that you're putting in there. But if you're like not measuring those small things, like a little bit of condiment on your food, and whatever you're putting in any recipe that you are making, like you're skipping those things that don't seem to make a difference, they actually do when you start to make the comparison. What would your caloric intake be if you were to add in those small things compared to when you're not? So I think that's another thing to consider, like how accurately are you actually tracking using MyFitnessPal. And if you're not tracking it very accurately, but you're using it to guide how much you're eating, then perhaps it might be even better to try to not use MyFitnessPal for a while, and try to just go more based on timing. So eating after you're working out, and just using hunger cues to make sure that you get enough, and see how that compares.
Yeah, yeah, for sure. I mean, is there anything else? I mean, that covers it for me. I mean, you got to be careful around nutrition advice over the internet, but that covers it for me on that question. I think we covered that pretty well. I mean, is there anything else you want to add in, Michael?
Yeah, I'm just looking back at the actual question to see if we covered it. So the questions that Lauren asks here are: what steps would you take to diagnose the cause of the problem? Well, she is working with a nutritionist. That's great, and also the coach that says that they're both hesitant to say that you should be eating less. Yeah, definitely, that's not something that we're saying here either, because we don't know your size. I think definitely one thing that you touched upon earlier that we should perhaps get into a bit more is that your 10 pounds heavier weight might be your ideal weight, and your 10 pounds lighter weight during your off season might be something that is way too light for you. And you didn't mention anything about body fat percentage or anything like that, but that should definitely be something that you consider. Like, are you actually getting way too lean when you're trying to diet in the off season, and those 10 pounds that you gain is actually your best weight where you're thriving?
Yeah, I mean, it makes. I mean, obviously we don't know. I mean, it could not be the case, but yeah, I mean, if you're dieting down to ridiculously tiny size in your off season, and then going through all the motions of training, and then actually when you get into race season, all you're doing is just putting yourself back to normal race weight, then maybe you should think about it. Actually, I don't need to lose this weight. But again, we don't know because you haven't put any body fat percentages up here in that question. But yeah, I mean, what's that? 10 pounds is 4.5 kilograms. So it's not a massive amount. Not a massive amount. A fluctuation throughout a whole season. Obviously, usually what you'd see people put on 4 or 5 kilograms or 10 pounds in the off season and lose it over the race season. But yeah, that might be something worth revisiting for sure.
So Lauren, you might want to send us, if you know your body fat percentage, then you might send it in, and we can just email you back and forth a bit more. But the other question here that she has at the very beginning of the question is whether she should be systematically doing experiments with different macros and nutrition. What do you think about that?
Well, I think anything like that, you're going to have to spend a reasonable amount of time with each experiment. So each of those things, it's not going to happen quick, and because it's dieting, and because it's what energy you're taking in, it's going to be a long term thing. So yes, you probably should be experimenting to see what works with you to a certain extent. But whatever you do should be well researched and should be well thought out. And like you say, you should be working with a nutritionist to help you do that, so you don't do anything ridiculous, and you don't miss out any key nutrients or something that you definitely need in your diet. So yeah, I mean, if you're having problems and you're not happy with your performance or perhaps how you feel, or you think that potentially your diet is hindering you, then yes, you should be having or experimenting with your diet. The other thing I'd say is, for most people in Northern Hemisphere, it's race season now. So now is probably not the right time to be doing that, just in case you do put yourself into a bit of an energy hole, um, or you really messed up your training and put yourself back a few weeks going into a key race. So I'd definitely leave that kind of thing for the winter. If I was coaching you, and if if you're a Northern Hemisphere athlete, for sure.
Yeah, and going back a little bit to that question about whether she might actually be too light in the off season, and during race season she gets back to her ideal weight, sort of naturally the body swings back against the unnatural change to a too lightweight for her. There are plenty of examples in triathlon, in professional triathlon, where athletes have struggled for years and then they put on weight and they come back and perform great things. I think Chris McCormack is one example. He came back significantly heavier and won the Ironman that he had Ironman the World Championships that he had been chasing for a while, but not really managing to put it together. And I think somebody like Pete Jacobs had the same sort of thing. So actually, they're like lighter is not always better. It might be that you are again going back to that just survival mode for the body. But also what you said there with her working with the nutritionist, I think that it really, any of those experiments, like if you have the luxury of having a nutritionist, then talk about it with the nutritionist. For listeners that might be in a similar situation and don't work with a nutritionist, and if they are using MyFitnessPal or something like this, what I would try to do is to experiment with more just intuitive eating, using hunger cues, really being diligent with the timing, as James pointed out. And I might probably I would encourage listeners to get Matt Fitzgerald's book The Endurance Diet as the baseline, because that's just a really good simple way of eating. It's not complicated. But it's good and healthy, balanced. So that's the approach that I would take. And he has this sort table called the diet quality score. So you're not measuring macros, you're not measuring calories, but you're just measuring like how much good healthy food you're getting in a simple subjective / objective. It's pretty objective, I guess, qualitative way. So that's a good starting point for a little bit of self experimentation. And then she asks, getting metabolic testing. Yeah, so I guess in this context, we're not talking about the VO2 max test, but we're probably talking about things like DEXA scans or things of that nature. What's your take on that?
Well, obviously, that kind of thing will help diagnose. Actually, so a DEXA scan will help diagnose what your body is made up of. It probably won't help diagnose the problem. Actually, if it is an issue while you're putting on fat, instead of losing it. So obviously, you can use it to help track you, but essentially, it's DEXA scan is a gold standard of body composition, measuring body composition. So I wouldn't use it as it's a very expensive method of doing that as well. I wouldn't use it as purely this is my body weight now. It's not something that for most athletes is reasonable to do it every couple of weeks or so to redo. So generally, I wouldn't be too worried about that. I would just go back and have a look at some of the things that we've mentioned here today, and try and address them potentially. Obviously, if you do a DEXA scan, then it will give you really really detailed analysis of your body composition. And if you want to check that the results you've been getting for your body fat are correct, then go for it. Obviously you could do some kind of metabolic testing on actually how many calories you're burning per hour. That might be quite useful, but obviously it depends on the intensity of exercise. It depends, what your thresholds are at the time, and what your weight is at the time. So if that moves on, then it's all going to be out.
Yeah, I think if she's, as you mentioned before, if she is using power and heart rate, she already gets a decent enough estimate of that. So I don't think that the extra accuracy of that is going to move the needle a lot. Yeah, I think that if Lauren is like uncertain of whether she actually is getting on putting on too much weight during racing season or not, so she isn't really sure, then maybe a DEXA scan might be a good idea to see if she actually has a problem in the first place, or if the problem really is losing the weight in the off season. But other than that, I agree that it might just be a bit of overkill, and just a much cheaper and an easier way to get started might be to just get a caliper, a body caliper from Amazon. That way you can estimate your body fat percentage pretty accurately, and that will help you as well diagnose whether you're actually at like a too high body fat percentage, or if you are right in the range where you should be.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, I completely agree with what you got with that.
And the final question that she has here is how do I know if this is from overtraining? So essentially, how do I know if I overtrain?
Well, there'll be several things that give away overtraining. It's the first is to look at your heart rate. If your heart rate is consistently decreased, then it's potential that you stress your body out a bit too much, and you are overtraining. In conjunction with things like you're feeling really fatigued. Your mood is gone. You're getting angry at people for no reason really. You're not hitting your sessions properly, so you're no longer able to hit your thresholds, or you're no longer able to hit that top end. And this has been going on for a while, because there's a difference between overtraining and overreaching. They're the kind of symptoms of overtraining.
Yeah, I would say that the mood state that, as you mentioned, and getting angry at people, that's a pretty big giveaway. There's I think you can find it for free access online to a questionnaire called the Profile of Mood States. That's one of the best validated questionnaires, and one of the best validated ways of any category to actually diagnose overtraining. If your Profile of Mood State score is in a certain range, then you might be at risk. So that's something that might be worth checking out. All right, and anything else we didn't cover with this, or are we pretty much done?
I'm just rereading the question. No, I don't think so. I think I covered most of it with that. I covered most of the question.
Okay, so Lauren, good luck, and hope that this helped. The next question is from Paolo in Italy, who writes, hello, Michael. I'm relatively new to the show, so forgive me if the topic has already been analyzed. It has not. It's a good question. The question is, to improve my triathlon swimming, late in November, I joined a swim program. Overall, the structure of the workouts is kind of traditional, with warm-up, technique, and drills, main set. 3 or 4 workouts per week, one easy, 2 hard sessions one easy session, 2 hard sessions of 90 to 100 minutes, and one additional session that is a mix between easy and hard. Compared to my previous experience, this is a significant increase in volume with 5.5K per session. I assume that is the longer hard sessions at least, and intensity as well. So 40% to 75% of the swimming here is done at 80 to 85% effort level. So this is the, I guess, subjective RPE of the sessions. Paulo goes on to write, after listening to your podcast and reading the book about the 80-20 approach to training, I started questioning the traditional swim approach. Is this way of training too intense? Or because swimming is a low impact sport, are we able to sustain and recover faster after hard swim workouts? Then he has an example workout. I don't think we need to go into that in detail. It's just a hard, big workout. And then finally, he writes, since I joined this swim program, I changed a lot in my technique with great focus on stroke rate and open water skills. I noticed improvement in my swim times both in the pool and in races, but I don't know if that's because I'm swimming more or because I swim better.
Obviously, if you're swimming more, then you hope you're getting better, especially if you're not used to swimming. You're probably just getting the feel for the water. Probably, you're your progression has probably been quite quick because your technique is improving quite fast. You're getting that fitness in the water. So that's potentially one of the reasons why you are getting better. But then I wouldn't discount your swim program. You know, the traditional approach to swimming definitely is not 80-20. It's definitely as me and Michael were talking about this earlier. It's definitely more like 60-70% aerobic, and then 30-40% those harder efforts that higher intensity, and that's definitely the traditional approach from a triathlon swim perspective. I think you've got to be careful of isolating single sports when you're doing triathlon. So actually putting it into a whole week, and actually is it 80-20 when I combine my swimming, my cycling, and my running, um, and then look at it that way. But yeah, for sure, the intensity in swimming is generally higher than you would do in your 2 sessions running and your 2 sessions cycling per week. Um, that said, generally swim programs do have 2 higher intensity sessions, and the rest of it is easier swimming. But from my experience, especially actually going through the process, like you explain, is even those aerobic sessions are generally harder in terms of perceived exertion, and definitely where they relate to thresholds, than actually they would be comparatively in running. So you might have 2 run sessions, maybe a track session with some intervals, and a tempo session, out in the hills or something, and then the rest of the running would be maybe a long run, which is aerobic, and some other runs in there which are also aerobic, which you generally don't get in swimming because the swim intensity is a bit higher. So yeah, I mean, it makes sense that swimming should be 80-20, but in reality, it definitely isn't for most swimmers, because the traditional approach is a lot more focused on that intensity than
And when you say that generally, isn't we're talking, I guess, mostly about triathlon swimming here, because like pool swimmers, they do so much swimming that they're probably closer to that 80-20. I don't know if they're actually quite there, but it's probably closer just because they do so much volume that a lot of it is easier.
I was gonna lead on to that. You took the words out of my mouth. So yeah, if you're a pool swimmer, then you could be swimming 50 to 80 kilometers a week of of swimming, and obviously not all of that is going to be an intensity. And yeah, like you say, it probably is more 80-20 approach. I myself come from a swim background, and I could definitely say that it is. You do a lot more aerobic swimming. Things like your warm ups are built up more. You know, you'll have some more technique work in there. Spend a lot more time in that aerobic zones. So yeah, for sure. The traditional swim approach is more 80-20. It's a question of whether or not triathlon swim programs are too intense, and you know I suppose it depends on whether you're getting the most out of your program or not. I mean, if it's working for you, and you are getting better, then my argument would be, well, why change something that's not broken? But then if you're finding that you're doing too much intensity, then and you're not delivering your workouts, you're not able to hit your thresholds, you're not able to hit the top end speed when you need to do that kind of thing to stress out your technique. That kind of things that you can't do because you're too tired, then definitely you need to think about actually toning in the intensity, and maybe putting some more aerobic swimming in there, so you get a bit more volume in without just turning it into a smash fest each session.
Yeah. I think the same that you touched on there. That as long as if you're improving, why fix what's not broken? That's the main thing, and things seem to be working for you right now. Yeah, we discussed this quite a lot last time you were in Portugal as well. This was one of the topics that we discussed, and I definitely don't have the traditional triathlon swim training myself personally, and I found that it works really well to do less intensity and just keeping the volume relatively high, at least by triathlon standards. And for a non-professional, non-full-time triathlete, I have a high volume, getting in roughly 18 kilometers or so per week, and only doing 2 hard workouts, where most traditional programs would have at least 2 like really hard workouts, and then maybe a couple of mixed sessions. Paolo here having at least one that is a mix between easy and hard. I think when I was training with the squad, what I found was that easy swimming it ended up being, as you said, at least like moderate intensity. We were always doing the easy swimming, quote unquote easy. On a send off time, there was actually it ended up becoming very challenging for me because I was getting slower, not faster, just because of the amount of intensity and still having a high volume, actually even higher than I am now. So I actually reduced my swim training volume and intensity, especially the intensity, and started improving a lot. And I'm still improving. I've been improving my swimming really a whole lot this year, and I'm training more like a traditional cycling or running based program, and for me it works. So for me it's been a question of, I think, finding the, in terms of intensity, the minimal effective dose, and not being too focused on doing training every single system at once, which I think happens in many triathlon programs. You want to have your threshold session, your VO2 session, and your tempo session, and potentially even a bit of speed, depending on what distance you're training for. And yeah, I've taken a step back from that and just focusing on one or at most two systems. So I might have a tempo workout and a VO2 max workout, and then the rest is just easy. And when I say easy, it means on an RPE basis. I'm not trying to hit any times. I don't have any send off times. I have a set recovery instead that I know will work. And I might even change that if the goal of the session is to be an easy aerobic session, and I feel that I need a bit more recovery. So that's what's been working for me really well. Of course, I was already at a decent level as a swimmer, so I think when you are getting to becoming faster, then these details start to matter a bit more. When you are more of a beginner, then there are more different options that will work for you. So later on, it will be more important to do things right, and earlier on, just swimming, as Paulo says, like just getting in the volume there, it, no matter what it consists of, is going to help a lot. So, but I'm curious to hear your thoughts on this, because we've talked a bit about my training as well together. So what are your thoughts on this? And it definitely differs probably from what you're doing, I think.
So essentially, going back to the traditional swim program where, like you laid out there, you got the VO2 session, a CSS session, a speed session, a few sprints to, really work on your technique while you're going fast. A mixed stroke session, and like you say, like a tempo session. So you look at that, and the intensity is pretty high across that program. I go back to actually, if swimming is your priority, then potentially the intensity is a bit harder, and you're putting more stress into that sport than you are swimming than you are running and cycling. So I go back to really making the point of it's not isolated. Swimming is not completely isolated from your running and from your cycling. You're still using the same energy systems, even if obviously the sports are very different. Um, in terms of actually how you structure the week, it depends on, like you say, whether you're a beginner or you've been doing it for a large number of years. So if you're a beginner, to be honest, just getting in the water and actually thinking about a technique whilst you swim is going to make you faster. I think some people do get good at, and this is where running and swimming is slightly different, is people get good at technique swimming slow, especially if you're a beginner, and never really get good at actually swimming hard with good technique. So because technique is so important when you're swimming, it is important that you can hold the technique and you have the muscular endurance to actually do the technique while you're swimming fast. I've seen plenty of age groupers or relative beginners with really really nice technique when they're swimming 2 minutes per 100 meters. So they're nowhere near the front of a race, and then as soon as you put them over any sort of distance or any sort of intensity, that either breaks down because just the muscular endurance isn't there, they haven't trained it, or they haven't trained actually maintaining their technique while they swim fast. So when swimming easy, it's nice and it's beautiful. But when you're swimming fast, when you really want to have good technique, you need to practice that, which I think some people do miss out a bit. Um,
Yeah, there's this misnomer that some people will say that, well, in swimming, I only practice my technique because I don't have perfect technique or I have bad technique. Whether you have bad technique or not perfect technique, it doesn't matter. I think at any point you should be doing some hard swimming and try to, as you say, learn how to improve your technique, but also do it while you're putting a bit of pressure on yourself and doing it at a harder intensity, because you're not going to just because I've heard like really strong cyclists and runners or bike runners say that, yeah, I already have very good aerobic fitness, my biking and running shows it. If I can just improve my swimming technique, I'll be a really strong swimmer. But that's not at all the case, and then they go out and do only technique training and not improving. And so that's another, on the other side of the spectrum, that's another mistake. So definitely not something to recommend either.
I mean, I always look at it as, I think, I can't remember which podcast guest it was, but one of your podcast guests a while ago was saying, and this is something I completely relate to, is, when you're doing your technique and you are a complete beginner, there's a point at the start where you do focus on technique, because there's no point in swimming along with absolutely awful technique, just wasting lots of energy, not getting the most out of the sessions. But then there comes a point, when you get down to that kind of 150 per 100 meters, 145 per 100 meters, well, actually, you need to put that technique into practice. So you need to actually, swim with some intensity while you think about your technique as well. So the intensity and the overall volume of a program with that technique becomes a priority. And then when you come down to this is very general, so you will work a bit on your technique while you're doing that. But when you come down to 115, 120, if you get down to that range again, then you make the marginal gains the marginal changes to your swim technique. So that's when you revisit it and actually think about so maybe I could catch a bit more efficiently with my left arm, or maybe I'm not catching enough water. My hand is not cooked properly, or something like that. That's my general approach. No, very general term. So techniques at the start when you're a complete beginner, then actually get the volume in, get some swimming under your belt. Actually work on that technique, get that technique embedded in. And once you get fast enough, then you revisit the technique and go, okay, where are those gains to be made?
Yeah, that makes total sense. Yeah, absolutely. To get to the actual question, to make sure that we have it covered, I guess from my perspective, I have, I think I talked about it on the podcast before as well. I have sometimes calculated my intensity distributions or block of training, like 8 weeks or so. And what I see inevitably is that swimming is definitely still the discipline where I have the most high intensity. So I might have only 70% low intensity compared to on the bike and run, where I will have 85 to 90% low intensity training. So, but that averages out to overall, I'm somewhere close to 80% of low intensity. So I think that is sort of what you're doing here, Paolo, as well. Like you have more intensity in your swim, and it might be okay. Just keep in mind that we're doing triathlon, we're doing swim, bike, run. So the overall structure of your program should be something that is manageable, and you're not doing too much intensity overall. So we're not isolating the sports. We're not doing an isolated swim program and an isolated run program and an isolated bike program.
Yeah, I mean, I was going to say, if Paolo's asking this because he's turning up to maybe a run session or a bike session after this, and consistently not being able to do it because the intensity is too high, then, or he's too tired, then potentially the intensity in the swim program is too high, and you need to adapt to change that. But yeah, like you said, you got to look at it as a balance of things. So is it 80-20 across all three sports? But yeah, for sure, I'd actually really think about, is this impacting your overtraining, and are you not able to get the most out of your overtraining? You need to, and if overtraining is a priority, if swimming is a priority, and it is having a bit of a knock-on effect on the other sports, but you've analysed swimming as a priority, then keep with swimming, keep the intensity in. But, if it's not the absolute priority, and you also want to be working on your cycling and running, and you really want to improve them as well, maybe they're the priorities, then potentially tone in the intensity. But yeah, when you look at the whole program, it should be around the 80-20 region.
Yeah, and with the caveat, of course, that there's no like magical numbers, but it's something that you can sort of compare and use as a reference and see what works for you. But what you say there about how it impacts your cycling and running, that is so true, and that's something that I experienced as well. It wasn't just that my swimming improved; even if I wouldn't have improved my swimming by changing my program, the improvements that I see in my running and my cycling, because I'm just able to do my running and bike workouts so much better than I was before, because I was just knackered after the swims. So that would be completely worth it, because it's been really really good, just because I'm not really, the swimming is no longer negatively impacting my running and cycling. So that's, again, for me personally, and your mileage may vary. I train at a fairly high volume, so for somebody training at a lower volume, you may not have the same sort of issues that I ended up having with too much swim intensity. That I guess is something to take into consideration as well.
Yeah. And obviously, you know, like you say, with a caveat, it's individualized to everyone. So everyone's an individual here, and it's, you know, finding your own way. You know, a coach will help you do that, but you know, you are an individual, and you know, everyone has their own strengths and weaknesses and their own backgrounds. So it is you know, personalized really how this works.
But I think what would you say? But as long as Paolo is improving, which he clearly is in swimming, if he also, as we talked about, doesn't feel that it's negatively impacting his run and bike training, then even though a traditional swim program isn't the 80-20 approach that we hear about a lot, it doesn't really make any sense to change things up, because things are working at the moment. So that's what you should be. That's what your ultimate aim is. It's not to be training in a certain way or doing anything a certain way. It's just to improve. And if you are doing that, and it's not improving as a triathlete, not just as a swimmer, so whether, depending on your priorities, you have that balance, then keep doing what you're doing.
And if you are improving, then you know, as we said for the other question, why fix something that isn't broken? I mean, for sure, there's going to be, in the future, there's going to be, you know, people are going to come out and say this swim program is better, you know, this way of doing it is better, and you know, it might well be, but there's a reason. You know, this is a traditional approach, and it's a traditional approach because, at least for the majority of people, it works. Or you know, they've seen some improvement. If people didn't see any improvement, this wouldn't be the traditional approach. And I'm not saying it's perfect. I'm just saying that, you know, just don't bash it so much. You know, there's probably ways of making it better. And you know, I'm not saying that if there are, don't go and do them. I'm just saying, you know, for the majority of people, this does work. So don't. So there's not really been, you know, that emphasis on changing it. You know, but potentially there's better ways of doing it than the traditional approach that you describe here.
Yeah, I agree. And one more thing that I just thought of. Paolo is asking about whether you can do more hard swimming because of less stress on the musculoskeletal system, and that is absolutely true. You don't have that musculoskeletal load that you have in running, especially. So that's definitely one thing that allows you to do more hard swimming without risk of injury. But just keep in mind that it's not just about the musculoskeletal system. It's also about your nervous system recovery and your sympathetic and parasympathetic response. And hormonal balance, etc. All of these things that are affected, so at a more central level than musculoskeletal level. So that would be the argument that there is such a thing as too much intense swimming, even though you could do it from a musculoskeletal perspective perfectly fine, but you might not be able to do it from these other perspectives. But again, where that line is for you, right now, you have not crossed that line, because you wouldn't be improving.
Yeah, for sure.
All right. So thanks again for coming on, James. It was great to chat and cover these questions with you.
Yeah, I hope I benefited some people out there. I hope it wasn't too much blabbering on there. But yeah, I enjoyed it. Thanks, Michael. Thanks for inviting me.
Hope you enjoyed that Q&A with Coach James. We really enjoy making them together, so it will hopefully be a more regular feature of these Q&A episodes, definitely. Please leave us feedback if you have some, and if there are ways that we can improve the Q&As and the flow of them, so that you get the most out of your listening experience. This was quite a long one, of course. We went on for quite some time, which I guess is a natural consequence of there being two people voicing their opinions over certain questions. So that might be something that just ends up happening. But for that reason, let's just leave it at this for now. And stay subscribed to the show, and you won't miss any shows coming out on every single Monday and Tuesday. So thank you for doing that. And if you have a moment, please leave a rating and review. That really helps us out. Big thanks finally to our sponsors, Precision Hydration, that you can find on precisionhydration.com. Take their free online sweat test and get your first box or tube of Precision Hydration electrolyte for free with the promo code THATTRIATHLONSHOW, all one word, all caps. And thank you to Roka that you can find on roka.com. They are the world leaders in tri-suits, wetsuits, apparel, and high-performance eyewear. Go check them out and take 20% off your entire order with the promo code TTS all caps. Thank you, as always, for listening. Keep training smart and keep loving triathlon.